There was a time when Africa's corporates' focus was on their local markets, and now, according to Baker Mckenzie, 20% of them are looking at targets in Asia, another 10% in North America. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight we chat to the authors of the report and an African company that has dared to trade into those regions before it became popular to do so. Tonight is with me Discovery's Chief Financial Officer Ricky Farber, still bearing the scars of American expansion, and Morne van der Merwe, partner at Baker Mckenzie. I say the scars. It was a R1 billion scar. Discovery, like other South African insurers, went into the United States in the last decade or so. Unlike other insurance companies, you bailed when you knew you weren't going to crack it. And maybe that's the secret of international expansion, Ricky.
Yeah, and in many respects we were also lucky, and we bailed in 2007. We actually managed to get some money out, and I think if we'd bailed 2 years later, we would have got nothing. So it was quite a challenge. We went in, I don't think we quite appreciated the difficulty of the American market in particular. And it's a completely different space, and it didn't quite work for us.
Well, it's a market that killed Sage. Sage was a well-respected South African insurance company, one of the founders of the unit trust industry in South Africa, along with Liberty and Donnie Gordon, of course. Louis Schill was renowned as an insurance operator in South Africa. The company is dead. And then Old Mutual very nearly lost its shirt in the United States as well. The United States is particularly tough, which is quite alarming when it looks like how many South African and African companies, Morne, are looking at the United States, possibly the toughest corporate battleground in the world to expand. Don't they pay attention to Ricky's history?
Well, I think there's been a lot of developments on the international stage insofar as international M&A is concerned. Also insofar as participation of South African companies on the global stage is concerned. I think the South African business community has become much more integrated onto the global stage, have become much more in tuned with risks, much more in tuned with how one goes about following a successful recipe for purposes of implementing a global M&A transaction.
Pre-1994, it was practically impossible for a South African company to expand anywhere other than Lesotho, and even then people in Lesotho weren't that delighted. Post-1994, we're no longer a pariah state. Democracy has enabled global expansion. Our politics has helped.
Yeah, absolutely, and there are very good examples out there of South Africans who have successfully marched onto offshore territories. I think Mr. Koos Becker of the Naspers Group, him penetrating the Asian Chinese market in a very successful manner, is a very good example of a success story, a South African company successfully expanding.
You look at Naspers, burned itself really badly in the early 2000s, wrote of many billions of rand because they thought this is like the Great Trek. We'll take our guys with us. We'll put them into new territories and they can run the place. Mistake. Allow the Chinese to run the businesses and reap and cream off the profits, as Naspers is doing. SAB Miller has learned those similar tricks as well. And you yourselves, Ricky, as doing joint ventures rather than going it alone with the biggest insurance company in the world, Ping An, and you're creating health insurance in China. I mean, you're trailblazers in China for this.
I mean, you spoke of our American experience. The one thing that we learned is we're very well known in South Africa, but once you get outside of South Africa, no one has hardly ever heard of Discovery, and in fact normally refers to the Discovery Channel as when you talk about Discovery. So in our expansion, it's really been about finding the right partner, whether it be Prudential, whether it be Ping An or AA.
Prudential in the United Kingdom, of course, another long-established, well-known brand, as Old Mutual is to South Africa, Prudential is to the UK.
Probably one of the best brands in the UK altogether. In the space.
But so you learn that you need to capitalize on other people's brands. You go into joint ventures, you go into partnerships. You've already bought out Prudential, a large chunk of one of the businesses in the UK and the health business there, because you're establishing it.
Sure. I mean, it's really about that. I mean, what we bring and what South Africans don't appreciate that they bring to the party is drive and innovation. Having worked in the US market, China, across all the boards, probably less so in China, but definitely in all the other markets, the European markets, they're somewhat staid. The people don't have the drive and innovation and the passion that we do. But we don't have the brands and the history that they do. So we try and bring the two together. And our partnerships with Prudential, with these different players, have really helped to do that.
I mean, 20% of the companies in your research are looking at Asia.
Yes.
Sanlam, for example, is doing amazing things going into India. Old Mutual's got a business in India as well. Yes. We see F&B's got a business in India. Shoprite pulled out of India. Just going into foreign markets doesn't guarantee success. What is your research telling you about the success rates of South African companies globalizing?
Well, we don't have specific numbers on success rates. What the research do show is there are certain things that if you follow the recipe, then you've got a higher likelihood of being successful. And what's quite interesting about the research is that it's very often the softer issues that could have a swinging effect on whether or not this will be successful or not.
For example?
For example, do you understand the culture? Do you understand the culture of the environment within which you are working? Do you understand the culture of the management team? Is it going to be possible for you to integrate that management team into your existing structure? If not, are you nimble enough to make the necessary changes to that management team to make sure that there's proper integration? Because I think that has showed to be one of the key factors insofar as being successful globally is concerned, is about integrating and having a culture of success.
And it's hard enough at home. It's hard enough when a South African company buys another South African company where the two chief executives might have gone to university together and kind of think, yeah, we can make this work. They end up fighting like cat and dog, and there's blood on the streets. Local M&A is messy enough. Global M&A must be like nuclear war sometimes, won't it?
And in our experience, I mean, and this is the advice that we do give clients, is rather spend more time at the front end of the transaction. Spend a lot of time on the due diligence side. Spend a lot of time on understanding the regulatory environment. Very often, there's a situation where clients would say, well, let's, time kills deals. We need to close this off very quickly. There's a lot of haste, and that is true. I mean, if you spend too much time on a deal, it just fizzles out and it doesn't close. But you need to find that balance on making sure that you've done proper homework, making sure that you do understand the regulatory environment, making sure that the road's prepared for the regulatory environment to be accommodated, and the deal to close. It's execution at the end of the day that's important.
Practically, Ricky, just give me a sense of what it's like to go into a place like China, which is about as culturally a polar opposite to South Africa as you can get.
Yeah, I completely agree. In our experience, culture, and probably the subtleties of the culture, is incredibly important. I mean, in China, there's a save face policy, so you actually can't criticize someone in a meeting. So the real discussions don't happen in a board meeting, for example. Very different from the UK or US style. The board meetings are more like a rubber stamp. The real discussion happens, in our case, between Adrian and Peter Marr, the two CEOs, before the board meeting, and things don't really get onto the agenda which are going to embarrass other people. You're not going to ask a difficult question. So those subtleties. So we took that same advice before we went into China and before we started with Ping An Health. We literally went and spoke to the other South African corporates and a few of the consulting firms that had worked in the area and tried to gauge some of those subtleties. We also put the staff that we've injected into there onto language lessons and it's a huge barrier. You actually don't know what's going on half the meeting because it's not in English.
Absolutely.
Now we have the privilege, and these guys are fantastic, of simultaneous translation these days, but there's still a subtlety in the text and the way it's conveyed that you just don't understand.
Well, look at the Oscar Pistorius trial, for example, in terms of how translation goes wrong in your own backyard. There's so many parallels.
What's key to what's been said is if you don't prepare to fail.
Absolutely.
It's about doing proper homework and going in prepared.
I mean, one looks at the graveyard of so many South African expansion strategies, and that's been Australia. So many companies have gone to Australia, got a little unionized, to use a colloquialism, snot club, and have come home with their tails between their legs. Pick n Pay did not once, but did it twice. They went to Australia, came back, then went back to Australia again because this time it's going to be different, and it wasn't. So many companies have hurt themselves in Australia. Investec is withdrawing largely out of Australia at the moment. However, Woolworths is expanding. It is choosing Australia. There are lots of interesting reasons for why they're doing it. Is Australia ever going to be on the radar of Discovery, or is it just simply too developed? You're looking more at emerging market strategies?
I mean, Australia is a country we've looked at more than once. The challenge with Australia, and I guess it's the same as our experience with the US, is I actually think, notwithstanding, the problem is South African companies think Australia is the same as South Africa. We all have lots of friends there, they all play great rugby, etc. But it's actually a completely different culture.
It goes to those soft issues, and it goes to what you think you know versus what you really should know.
Correct. I mean, our experience, and I've worked both in Discovery and with lots of interaction with the likes of Investec, who've made it successfully in the UK. The UK is a lot closer, and in many respects, the South Africans, that work the best in the UK are the ones that transition, been there for a couple of years, and understand both sides of the equation. Companies entering into Australia, in our experience and the little work that I've done there, completely underestimate the difference.
It's interesting, isn't it, Morne? I mean, just to wrap up, in terms of what you see as the trends, the next, I don't know, how far can you look at, 5, 10 years of M&A activity, where is the South Africa focus happening primarily?
So far as inbound investment, I think resources will always be a big attractor for investment into South Africa. I also do believe that the fact that South Africa has been seen as an emerging market where there's a developing middle class, one of the main reasons for acquisitions into this territory will be to access to that developing middle class. And I think in years to come, the infrastructure that we are busy building at the moment in the power and energy sector is something which will become quite important from an M&A point of view going forward.
Okay, that's inward. What about outward?
Outward, South African companies, I think, are becoming more and more confident in their ability to be successful in foreign jurisdictions. Bidvest is another brilliant example. I mean,
its food services business has been spectacular.
Absolutely, and this week again, announcements of deals in the UK and in Italy. I think there's a confidence building, and I think South Africans have the ability to identify opportunities, and they are now coupling that ability with lessons learned in the past, and I believe we're going to see much more expansion of South African companies offshore.
True story, just to wrap up, in the UK fairly recently, came out of a pub where I didn't drink Peroni, but it was on tap in the pub, an SAB Miller product. Came out of the pub, was standing on the pavement admiring the Nando's diagonally across the road when a Bidvest food services truck came driving
all
past.
over London.
All I needed then was some old mutual insurance agent to come and sell me life insurance, and it would have...
We could have done it.
You could have done it too. I could have had a discovery broker looking to sell me health insurance, and it would have had a complete South African experience in the United Kingdom. Discovery's Chief Financial Officer Ricky Farber and Morne van der Merwe, partner at Baker Mckenzie, enlightening us about merger